A Chinese war lab said they found a weakness in the US naval radars and now can strike an aircraft carrier with a hypersonic weapon. This has been viewed as the next checkmate by China. Is it? Welcome to China Insider. I'm David Zhang. On paper, everything sounds really good. And that's exactly what happened with the latest simulation study by a China-based war lab, which is studying electronic warfares using satellites to jam the signal on US's naval-based radars, and in turn can use a hypersonic missile to strike the aircraft carrier, which is at the center of America's power projection in the Pacific Ocean. After jamming US radars, it allows the strike range of up to 1,200 kilometers or about 745 miles, which outranges the operational radius of the aircraft carrier strike group, which is about 1,000 kilometers or about 645 miles. And according to the study, the American radars do not detect the missiles until 10 minutes after launch. By then, the missiles are just 50 kilometers or 30 miles away. And of course, because of the outranging aspect, this is supposed to turn the tide of the war by destroying the center of the aircraft carrier strike group, the aircraft carrier itself. The head of this research lab, his name is Zhang, he says that the missiles went undetected because China's space-based electronic weapon system was suppressing the radars of the escort ships in a top-down manner. And of course, they're referring to the Aegis system, which is a cutting-edge detection system, anti-missile system of the US destroyers. And this has been in deployment for a very long time, so it's a quite publicly known system, especially among the top military and adversaries. So it sounds quite bizarre, in my view. Just the fact that with one little exploitation, you can suddenly destroy the whole fleet or the entire group. It sounds too good to be true. And with that being said, does that mean the American power projection is just done with? First of all, long-range strikes, particularly with hypersonic missiles, they're seen as a difficult task because you're striking at high-speed moving targets like ships, the aircraft carriers, as well as essentially you have to worry about the cost as well, right? The cost to build a hypersonic missile is much more expensive than a traditional missile. So it's not likely they have a huge arsenal of them. And we also have to consider that, what we've seen in Russia recently with the Kinzhal, supposedly hypersonic weapon, easily defeated by the Patriot missiles defense system. So there are real aspects to consider that are outside of simulation. Now, after reading this story, I couldn't stop and basically laugh because this sounds like something out of a Chinese Writers Guild cinematics writing club. And it was written in a script to please Xi Jinping to say that look how powerful our anti-American ship system is. We have this supposedly beautiful satellite chain link that can go up in the sky, jam all the radars, and basically destroy their power. You have to understand, China's never going to make a study and publish it and make it sound like that it's saying the CCP is doomed, right? You're never going to find that because, first of all, it's never going to get approved by the research team. And then second of all, you're probably going to get in trouble if you publish something about China's unpreparedness or its actual military readiness. Now, the article starts with this, right? It says the laboratory has found a weakness in the radar that the US Navy used and could overwhelm it with the new space-based technology. Look how nice that is, right? They're actively telling the US military what the weakness and the exploitation could be. So it's like, why are you so nice to your enemy if it's actually true? Shouldn't you be hiding this and not telling them publicly in a study? I mean, do you want to win or do you want the enemies to win? And like I said, the simulation is based on the assumption that the target, which is the aircraft carrier, would just sit there and not move. Now, the capability they're claiming here is that with those near-space satellites, just 2 of them can achieve the jamming signal that can overwhelm the radars on board the US naval group, and then in turn, by the time that they actually notices it, it's already too late. But look how big of a joke this is. Is everybody on board just sleeping the whole time? What about the land and air-based assets like long-range radars? You have reconnaissance, you have air superiority, right? You have other allies and partners in the region that can help with sending and relaying the information that they have to the carrier strike group. There's also a huge issue with things like, for example, nobody's going to be relying on a single source for like radars for information on something that is so critical as the hypersonic weapons. There's also backup radar systems, secondary radar systems, and the entire strike group, its own design is to keep the aircraft carrier safe. And it's, of course, being upgraded with the threat of the hypersonic missiles in mind for the years to come. So the study itself failed to include that there are a wide array of information available to the carrier strike group as it's connected to multiple sources of information available for it to evade and to deal with the hypersonic threat. In some cases, this is even admitted in Chinese writing as well, that the aircraft carrier strike group is a small black hole because nothing can get inside of it, missiles, planes, or whatever else. And this is not even including, in reality, there's going to be the offensive aspect as well, right? If we know that it's gotten to a point where hypersonic missiles are used, it's likely that the two sides are already locked in a conflict. By this time, the actual operational ability of the aircraft carrier will be on full display. You would have air superiority. You would have striking targets already. For example, near the side of the Chinese, you have missile launch sites. You'd have airports. You'd have missile silos that will be destroyed and targeted before they're allowed to be used to strike the targets. And then so with the report, they basically say that as long as the single radar is jammed, that their entire fleet is just blacked out. No information available, which is simply untrue in today's day and age. And it's even more bizarre if you consider that they're assuming that the aircraft carrier strike group would do nothing and just stand still and just take the hit because one of their radar system is down. It sounds like exactly what they did in the deserts of China. They built this life-sized replica of the Gerald Ford class supercarrier, and just as if it's a target practice, right? They're just shooting things at it, and then it's just standing still. Of course, the story is being picked up by Western media outlets and saying that, oh my God, China's done it again. They're outperforming us militarily. Now, obviously, the threat of the hypersonic missiles are still there, right? You can't let your guards down. But it's one thing to assume that it's always going to work, and it's another when you put it into practice. Now, the Pentagon and Defense Development is continuing to upgrade the existing Aegis system, which is used against the hypersonic threats. For example, in the words of Navy Vice Admiral John A. Hill, director of the Missile Defense Agency, he says that based on the threat evolution, they will be delivering the next sea-based terminal incremental upgrade in 2025. So the technological upgrades on both sides, they're increasing. It's just one can always outdo the other. And I bet my money more on the US side than on what we know about the Chinese military preparedness. Another major issue with the hypersonic aspect is that because the weapon itself, it generates so much heat and so much of the matters, ionic matters, that it cannot carry a sensor like traditional missiles would, where they can go and seek out the target once it reaches back into the atmosphere and tries to hit, right? So in that process, you run into issues where it has to only get the information from nearby radars. Because the missile itself doesn't have the sensor, they rely on external or secondary information and radars in the nearby space to try to hit the target. And so if you have air superiority, you have air reconnaissance, you have missile warfare, you have electronic warfare, systems that are in place that can jam the signal of nearby radars of the enemy and in turn direct the missile to not hit its target. In other words, the farther those sensors are, the more you can spoof it, right? So you break down the kill chain and it can't really land on its target. And of course, hypersonic missiles are also easy to track. If you have long-range radars, they appear on both the infrared signature as well as Doppler graphs. So you can actually see and calculate the trajectory based on where they are. So if your software is tuned for that, you can easily get the entire trajectory tracked, right? Now, the difficult part comes in that there's now a new form of the hypersonic weapon called a hypersonic glide vehicle, which is supposed to have an unpredictable path of flight once it re-enters the atmosphere. So in this sense, the reaction time is decreased, but it still doesn't mean that there is no response from the aircraft carrier as well as its strike group to respond to something like that. And let's not forget, right, China does not have access to cutting-edge chips, which means that their ability for the sensors to operate is also not as good as the American side. And so when it comes to these type of things, these are all elements that's not being considered in the study itself. And remember, all this information is available real-time to the carrier strike group to make decisions, to maneuver, to come up with a plan against it. Of course, there's still the air-to-air defense systems on board the strike group that's used to defeat the incoming missile. And of course, China's capability is also another question to me. Recently, we hear about the news from Bloomberg revealing through these intel obtained about China's hypersonic weapons, some of them are even filled with water, because during examination, they don't want to seem like the fuel is not there, so they fill it with water to match the weight, etc. So there's deep-rooted corruption in the Chinese military. There's also silo vents, these missile silo vents, the lids of them, they cannot open. So the operation readiness of the CCP is terrible. So the PLA, remember, this is coupled with the recent purge of the rocket force, which is also responsible for launching these missiles. Part of the reason why they're being purged is because these generals know the actual capability of the fighting force, and they know that if they do go to war, the chance of them winning is very slim because of the years worth of corruption, the unpreparedness, all of these things, right? So that's why Xi Jinping got rid of them, because they were unwilling to die for his cause, because they know really the true ability of the CCP and the PLA. Now, the paper talks about the solution against the radars, which is to launch a series of low orbit satellites, which they say 20 plus of them, you can do a global strike, whereas 2 of them, you can jam the signals. Now, in the researchers here, they claim that the space-based platforms, unlike electronic warfare aircraft, operate beyond national boundaries so that they can swiftly mobilize across the globe and cover a broader combat range. And because these satellites are in orbit for only a few hundred kilometers, the jamming signals they beam down suffer minimal power loss, require less sensitive receivers, and transmit power, and are more feasible for engineering. So basically, they say that when the Chinese anti-ship missiles, they're about 50 kilometers within that range, or about 30 miles of the target, says that the satellites complete their suppression mission, the missile-borne jammers are activated, and the missiles perform terminal maneuvers for further penetration until they destroy the target, which is still under the assumption that the onboard missiles can do that, right? Again, I say the capability is a big question. And so basically, for the CCP to successfully hit the target, which is the carrier, aircraft carrier, they'd have to assume that the carrier doesn't move. It has the capability to launch the missile and fire it successfully, as well as having the technology to back it up to suggest that it can actually arrive and hit the target, which in my view right now, they don't have neither of the 3 I just listed. So these type of articles are just self-serving fantasies of the Chinese war labs. All right, that's it today for the episode on China's hypersonic threat, once again, supposedly overwhelming American power. And in my view, it's really unrealistic. But if you enjoy the content, leave a like, comment below your thoughts on this topic, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, bye-bye.